We now start to enjoy yet another masterpiece, yet another fairy tale. Of all the fairy tales in this series, Flaubert's novel Madame Bovary is the most romantic. Stylistically, it is prose doing what poetry is supposed to do. A child to whom you read a story may ask you, is the story true? And if not, the child demands a true one. Let us not persevere in this juvenile attitude towards the books we read. Of course, if somebody tells you that Mr. Smith has seen a blue saucer with a green operator whiz by, you do ask, is it true? Because in one way or another, the fact of its being true would affect your whole life, would be of infinite practical consequence to you. But do not ask whether a poem or a novel is true. Let us not kid ourselves. Let us remember that literature is of no practical value whatsoever, except in the very special case of somebody's wishing to become, of all things, a professor of literature. The girl Emma Bovary never existed. The book Madame Bovary shall exist forever and ever. A book lives longer than a girl. The book is concerned with adultery and contains situations and allusions that shocked the prudish Philistine government of Napoleon III. Indeed, the novel was actually tried in a court of justice for obscenity. Just imagine that, as if the work of an artist could ever be obscene. I am glad to say that Flaubert won his case. That was exactly 100 years ago. In our days, our times, but let me keep to my subject. We shall discuss Madame Bovary as Flaubert intended it to be discussed, in terms of structures, movements as he termed them, thematic lines, style, poetry, and characters. The novel consists of 35 chapters, each about 10 pages long, and is divided into 3 parts set respectively in Rouen and Tostes, in Yonville and in Yonville, Rouen and Yonville, all of these places invented except Rouen, a cathedral city in northern France. The main action is supposed to take place in the 1830s and 1840s under King Louis Philippe, 1830 to 1848. Chapter 1 begins in the winter of 1827, and in a kind of afterword, the lives of some of the characters are followed up till 1856 into the reign of Napoleon III, and indeed up to the date of Flaubert's completing the book. Madame Bovary was begun at Crochat near Rouen on the 19th of September 1851, finished in April 1856, sent out in June, and published serially at the end of the same year in the Revue de Paris. 100 miles to the north of Rouen, Charles Dickens in Boulogne was finishing Bleak House in the summer of 1853 when Flaubert had reached part 2 of his novel. 1 year before that, in Russia, Gogol had died and Tolstoy had published his first important work, Childhood. 3 forces make and mold a human being: heredity, environment, and the unknown agent X. Of these, the second, environment, is by far the least important, while the last, agent X, is by far the most influential. In the case of characters living in books, it is of course the author who controls, directs, and applies the 3 forces. The society around Madame Bovary has been manufactured by Flaubert as deliberately as Madame Bovary herself has been made by him, and to say that this Flaubertian society acted upon that Flaubertian character is to talk in circles. Everything that happens in the book happens exclusively in Flaubert's mind, no matter what the initial trivial impulse may have been, and no matter what conditions in the France of his time existed or seemed to him to exist. This is why I am opposed to those who insist upon the influence of objective social conditions upon the heroine Emma Bovary. Flaubert's novel deals with the delicate calculus of human fate, not with the arithmetic of social conditioning. We are told that most of the characters in Madame Bovary are bourgeois, but one thing that we should clear up once and for all is the meaning that Flaubert gives to the term bourgeois. unless it simply means townsman, as it often does in French. The term bourgeois, as used by Flaubert, means Philistine, people preoccupied with the material side of life and believing only in conventional values. He never uses the word bourgeois with any politico-economic Marxist connotation. Flaubert's bourgeois is a state of mind, not a state of pocket. In a famous scene of our book, when a hard-working old woman, getting a medal for having slaved for her farmer boss, is confronted with a committee of relaxed bourgeois beaming at her, mind you, in that scene, both parties are Philistine, the beaming politicians and the superstitious old peasant woman. Both sides are bourgeois in Flaubert's sense. I shall clear up the term completely if I say that, for instance, today in communist Russia, Soviet literature, Soviet art, Soviet music, Soviet aspirations are fundamentally and smugly bourgeois. It is the lace curtain behind the iron one. A Soviet official, small or big, is the perfect type of bourgeois mind, of a Philistine. The key to Flaubert's term is the Philistinism of his Monsieur Hermès. Let me add for double clarity that Marx would have called Flaubert a bourgeois in the politico-economic sense, and Flaubert would have called Marx a bourgeois in the spiritual sense, and both would have been right, since Flaubert was a well-to-do gentleman in physical life, and Marx was a Philistine in his attitude towards the arts. Of Louis Philippe, the citizen king, Le Roi Bourgeoisie, from 1830 to 1848 was a pleasantly dingy era in comparison to Napoleon's fireworks in the beginning of the century and to our own variegated times. In the 1840s, the annals of France were tranquil under the cold administration of Goujon, but 1847 opened with gloomy aspects for the French government. Irritation, want, the desire for a more popular and perhaps more brilliant rule, trickery and subterfuge seemed to reign in high places." Unquote. A revolution broke out in February 1848. Louis Philippe, quote, assuming the name of Mr. William Smith, closed an inglorious reign by an inglorious flight in a hackney cab. Unquote. Encyclopedia Britannica, 9th edition, 1879. I have mentioned this bit of history because good Louis Philippe, with his cat and umbrella, was such a Flaubertian character. Now another character, Charles Bovary, was born, according to my computations, in 1815. Entered school in 1828, became an officer of health, which is 1 degree below doctor, in 1835, married his first wife, the widow Dubuc, in the same year at Tostes, where he started practicing medicine. After losing her, he married Emma Rouault, the heroine of the book, in 1838, moved to another town, Yonville, in 1840, and after losing his second wife in 1846, he died in 1847, aged 32. This is the chronology of the book in a capsule.